We'd like to have your tour. I remember you from, I saw you last summer. I was here.
You were here last summer.
Well, it's Saturday, September 5th. We're going to go check out this old barn here. Oh boy, it smells old in here too. Old stuff. These are these old kind of windows, Miguel, where they're all wavy like that. You can tell that's old class.
Well, welcome to the Octagon House. My name is Randy, and I'll be your guide for the next hour as you tour this spacious old home. This is the home that John Reichardt built for his family. It was begun in the early 1850s. By 1854, the family moved in here, and they lived here successively through 3 generations until 1937. At that point, Will Thomas was living here all alone. He was a grandson of the builder. And when he passed away, the other relatives within the immediate area made arrangements for the house to become a museum. The Octagon design was very popular in mid-1800 architecture. People like Arson Fowler wrote extensively on the design and its many options that it gave the builder. One of the unique things that it gave people was the chance to build as close as they could get to a circle, and a circle was considered perfection. In this home, on each floor, there is the same floor pattern. 4 square rooms and then wedge-shaped rooms between them to make up the area. The smaller wedge-shaped rooms were given a purpose depending on the larger rooms around them. Before we step into the home, if you look around you, what you see now is a beautiful subdivision or set of streets was once all farmland that came with the house, approximately 100 acres of land. And the earliest pictures of the home, the pictures were taken far away down the hill, looking up. The fields were planted with wheat or with corn, and there was one path cut through the field to the front door of the home. Gradually through the years, as the city grew, the family sold off the land to supplement their income. The streets bear the names of some of the family members: Charles Street, Harvey Ave, Thomas Ave, and so forth. Now as we enter the home, you're going to be walking into a small wedge-shaped room which they used as their front hall for greeting their guests. 19 of you are not going to fit in that room, so you can just continue right on into the music room where we're going to continue. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask. I'll be glad to help you if I can. You can take any pictures that you'd like. The only thing I'm going to ask of you in return is that you stay with me from room to room as we tour the home. I'm not going to end up on America's Funniest Videos.
No, I guarantee that. My family donated stuff here. Dentist things. He was a dentist and a doctor.
When the family lived here, this room is what they called their music room. This is where they did most of their formal entertaining. The piano used to sit in this room. When the house became a museum, the relatives that made the arrangements asked that their best pieces be left intact in one setting. And so then the piano was moved into the front parlor. The table in the center of this room is a Four Seasons table. The base is black walnut, and there is a face carved on each side of the table representing a season. On this end we have Old Man Winter, and we start with spring, summer, and autumn. The mirror which accents the table between the windows is a pier mirror, which was a gift to us. It originally hung in the Cole home in Watertown and was brought here after being stored in the barn for 40 years. It was rehung in 1937, just in time for the house to be opened as a museum. Hanging from the ceiling in this room is also a nice example of kerosene lighting. This chandelier will move or swing so that by moving a lever it will come down from the ceiling, it can be lit, and then pushed back up and locked in place. We still use that and several other chandeliers for evening lighting in the house if we're here working or if we have performances going on. Despite their wealth, this family never had the house piped for the gas light fixtures. They did not have city water piped into the home, and they did not have electricity. They did have a phone line. However, at one point it was removed because they did not feel that the $1.25 annual bill was worth their effort. And then it was put back in again at a later time. All of these large, square, formal rooms do face the center of the home. Now the picture in this of Rosie Rogan is hanging on one of the chimney walls. From the basement footings all the way up through the house, those chimney walls make up the center support of the home. They're approximately 14 inches thick, and they contain the flues from the furnace in the basement and then rise through the home to let the waste vapors out of the home. If you think of that as the hub of the home, the octagon as a circle moves around it like a wheel. This picture shows you how the house looked when the family was living here. The old porches were unpainted, and because of that, were subject to a lot of weathering and deterioration. By the 1920s, the porches that weren't removed had to be removed for safety. And then the house stood for almost 60 years without its porches. The porches you see today were reconstructed in 1982 to match the old designs. The only difference is that by state law, we had to make the railings a little bit higher. The house was built in 1852 or 1854 for approximately $10,000 to $12,000. The porches were restored in 1982 for $52,000. The original cost did not reflect much in the line of lumber. Mr. Richards got all of the lumber from the forest, or rather the woods that he owned around the city. His mills cut the lumber, so he had very little preparation cost. I'm going to talk to you next about this room, which is the front parlor. You can come up to this opening. Some of you might want to go back into the hallway and look through the receiver and talk with some of your older relatives or your grandparents. They'll tell you that a front parlor like this was a room that was only open for special occasions. Because it was kept closed most of the time, furniture stayed in very good repair. And that's the case with this room also. Everything in it was from 1853 when the family moved in, with the exception of the needlepoint chair from the 1880s. And this table, which was shipped to them, it's addressed to Watertown in the territory of Wisconsin. So we know that it came here before 1848, and they used it in their log farmhouse. Here again, we have a beautiful example of a kerosene fixture. This one is exceptionally nice when it's lit. The cut glass chimneys sparkle when the fire shines through them. So it gives a very nice, pleasant atmosphere to the room. This room has the only fireplace in the house, something very different for a house of this vintage. This is Vermont marble. It was shipped here as a gift when they were building the home, and they put it in this room where the best of their furnishings would be kept. Remember, Mr. Richards did build a furnace of a sort in the basement of this home. It was designed to take huge logs. The heat from the fire was going to rise through these massive chimney walls and then enter the rooms through registers like this one. The only problem was that it was a gravity flow system. There wasn't a blower designed at that time, and the heat never made it much further than the first floor. So they did have to go back through all the large formal rooms like this one and put in a pot-bellied stove for auxiliary heat. In some of their diaries, they made notes that on the worst winter days, all they did was go from room to room stoking fires and carrying wood through the mansion, and that they were extremely tired at night and would have to wake up again during the night to keep stoking the fires. It was a very hard existence in the frontier in Wisconsin. Mr. Richards' picture is on the left of the piano. His wife Eliza is on the right. Her parents are the Forbes in the center. Mrs. Richards' parents owned several stagecoach lines and hotels, and she was used to maintaining a building like this. This house never had formal servants. They had occasional day help from within the city, but most of the work was done here by Eliza and her children. In later years, Anna, their eldest daughter, lived here for many years until she was 94. With her son, she maintained this home by herself, and in her 60s, 70s, and 80s, she calcimines rooms. She mentions taking rugs out and beating them. So she did a lot of more work at an older age than people are used to today.
Didn't this used to be roped off where you couldn't walk around here?
Well, I've been guiding here for 7 years, and it's never been
Oh,
roped
really?
off all those
It
years.
seems like it used to be.
We pride ourselves that we get people into most of the rooms of the house.
Oh.
So you can shine that thing someplace else. This was their dining room. It's on the northeast side of the home, so it doesn't get a lot of natural sunlight. Mrs. Richards had these shades designed with a crocheted border, and that's the only window treatment she ever had in here. She liked her natural light, and any of the other velours or velvets or jacquards at that time would have been heavy and would have kept her precious light out of the room. This room is the most recently decorated room in the home. The wallpaper is from a book on preservation or renovation papers. It was put up last April, just before the house opened for the season. In contrast, the rug is one of the oldest in the home. Originally, when it was in its prime state, it could be taken out. When you were done beating it, you could bring it in and put it upside down, and the pattern was reversed. The table is set with flow blue or flow through china, something that was at first an accident at the plate maker and then became very popular. You can see it looks like the blue is coming through the bottom of the plate. The Richards had a set like this at the turn of the century that went with one of their relatives. Later, the tour guides bought these on the East Coast and shipped them back as a gift to help recomplete the dining room. The spoons are set across the top of the plate in a high fashion or European type of setting. Each of the spoons has an ending initial with an F, and that's for Forbes. These were pieces used by Eliza before she was married, when she entertained some of her friends for an afternoon tea. This beautiful storage unit is something that Mr. Richards added to the floor plans, and you can imagine how precious this was to have on the first floor in the dining room, floor to ceiling approximately 15 inches deep. It's finished in cherry wood, as is this table, the grand staircase railing, and one suite of furniture upstairs. Choke cherry trees one time grew in this area. They were trees that grew to an enormous size and a massiveness that gave beautiful planks for woodworking, and they were used for accent in this home. Because of the amount of lumber required to do all the woodworking in here, many types of wood were used, and it was always painted then as a final result. That was the only way they could blend all the woods together. They could never stain them to match. In this room, the plate rails that you see were added in 1908. They thought it was just the most wonderful innovation, and they added it when they redecorated this room at that point. Before that, on the wall where the young girl's picture is hanging, there was almost a floor-to-ceiling china closet, which for some reason they chose to close in. Now as you come around the house, of course, we have to keep our circular motion going. This next little wedge-shaped room was what they called their buttery. If you study history, there are butteries, butteries, and pantries. Pantry is almost always a room that's next to the kitchen, and we have two of them in this house, but they're downstairs by the kitchen. A butlery is in a wealthy home. It's locked, seldom has a window, and only the master of the home and the head butler had keys to it. That way the other servants could not pilfer the silver and the cloths and the fine pieces from the family. This is a buttery. It's just a serving point. The dumbwaiter comes up in the corner from the kitchen with all the food. There are many shelves full of dishes that are ready for a moment's notice of entertaining or for a tea. And then it stayed cool enough in this home so that their creams and sauces didn't spoil between meals. And that's the only purpose that that room has ever had. So as you walk through here, make sure you take a peek through that window. So are there any dining room questions? I'll meet you in the family's living room. Put a little light on the subject. When the family lived here, they referred to this as their living room or their east parlor. By your standards today, you would call this a family room or a den. They met here on a day-in, day-out basis. The other rooms on this floor were very given to formal entertaining. But this room was theirs. They met here all the time. They had their separate entrance to the south lawn where the barn and the wells were kept. Many of their friends came regularly to this door. They hardly ever used the front door that you came in. If they were living here today, this is where you'd find them enjoying their TV and their stereo. You littler people would be playing your Nintendo game in here. This was a very informal room for them. The only piece of furniture in this room that's original to the family is this chair. This belonged to their son Willie, whose picture is on the far wall. Willie was injured in a baseball game in his later teens and never recovered from his injuries and became an invalid. And because they didn't have medicine or proper surgical procedures, he became more and more handicapped and passed away in his later 20s. This chair was made for him. It's very rounded for comfort rather than being rigid and formal. And they were English people, very fond of their pets, so they had the dogs' heads carved onto the arms of the chair. Now to complete the circle on the first floor, we have this small little room, and that triangular room was bumped out by means of a bay window, and has always been their Florida or sunroom. Now, this set of steps to the third floor. The third floor of this house is completely set up as bunk area for the workmen, or I should say it was set up as bunk area. By climbing this staircase, those gentlemen passed through a private chamber of the home. They were never in any of the family's living areas upstairs. There are doors to two of the bedrooms which were kept locked at that time. But that way the family had their privacy and the workmen had an easy way in and out of the home. Is everybody done looking? Okay. In all the other rooms, those large windows were actually French doors which opened out onto the porches. That gave a lot of cross ventilation. If you think of this house, it's almost round, so no matter where the breeze was coming from, some of it would come through an open door or an open window. If it was real hot, they would climb up the staircase out onto the cupola and open all of those windows, and then the heat would rise through the center of the home in a chimney effect. So in summertime, this home was usually very comfortable. The porches were not so much for entertaining as they were to protect the house. They're just wide enough to keep most of the sun out and to buffet the winds during a storm or a cold snap. In the center of the home, you're going to see a beautiful circular staircase. And as you look up from the base, it just keeps spiraling all through the home. It's called a cantilevered or free-hanging staircase. And there are no supports as you go up the staircase on the center portion of it. It is a very intricate design where the steps are wedged together and then they hang into the chimney walls. It's as though that staircase is standing on one leg and then holding onto the wall. Very time-consuming, intricate process that took several years to complete. The craftsmen that worked on it had to boil the wood so that they could twist the stair rails in a circular motion. All the stringers had to be spun also to keep the same motion all through the home. As you gather at the base of the staircase to go up through the house with me, if you look up, you'll see a gold star. That's where you're going to be in about 20 minutes. But while you're gathering out there, I'm going to go ring the doorbell for you. Now, we can just go over maybe in the first couple steps and I'll be right back. In this chamber, there's a doorknob, a big porcelain doorknob next to the door on the millwork. There's a wire through the wall, and down and along the floor joist. And then the wire comes back up in this section. And by having the bell here, it can be heard all through the house. And then I'll just scoot you in. And if you want to come up to the second floor, we'll talk about their running waters. This bedroom set has a very lively commode set in it. This pitcher would be taken out into the hall where you get your bathing water or wash water. You pour it into the basin and set this off to the side on a smaller table. Then there's a small water pitcher here, shaving mug, soap dish, and a toothbrush holder. On the floor is what's called a slop jar. This is for emptying the washed water once you were through with it. And then, of course, at the foot end of the bed is the chamber pot. The stove in this room was a wedding gift that they brought with them from the East Coast. This is a Franklin stove, the two flumes if they wanted privacy for a quiet moment to write or to gather their thoughts. Remember, the downstairs was mostly for formal entertaining, except for that family living room, and that was a very busy place. This little wedge-shaped room was for small children. If the family grew, it would become a sitting room or a dressing room for mom and dad. In some families, as the family aged, the parents might take a different room and another generation would move into an area like this. In this home, it always stayed with John and Eliza. This is the only bedroom that's never been redecorated. That wallpaper is the original paper from the 1850s. If you'd come to visit here 100 years ago, the family would have had you stay in this room. Undoubtedly, you would have stayed for several weeks or maybe even a few months because travel was very hard and sometimes very dirty, very bumpy. And you would have rested up and visited and enjoyed a visit with the family. If you'd had little children visiting with you, this small room would have been made ready for them. And that's why we've got a toy collection on display in it. If you came alone, it would have been outfitted more as a small sitting room for you. This room is on the northwest side of the home, so it never gets any harsh sunlight, day or night, or day or afternoon rather. The furnishings were considered the best of their time and kept in immaculate condition because the visitor was something very treasured. It has a walk-in closet here for your storage items.
I think is that
Eastern River Valley, it commands a beautiful view of the countryside. The small room to my right has been decorated as a little girl's room in memorial of the Richards daughters that passed away. You can take turns looking in there. On the far end, you can see the beautiful blue walls of the workman's staircase. If you look out in that area, you can see where they came up in the distance. They had to walk through that room, and then you can see the first step to the third floor. It's about 14 inches off the floor. But Anna's room is considerably smaller than the other bedrooms on this floor, and that's because there's a bathing area built into it. These doors could be folded shut. There were some sections that are missing right now for tour purposes, but they could bathe in privacy. Tub bathing was a luxury that was not done very frequently. If they did do it, they would put hot water into the tub, temper it with cool water and bathe some children, and then keep adding hot water so another lady could bathe, and some more hot water so that a man could bathe, and then they'd empty the tub. Water was a very precious commodity, and hot water meant a lot of work. So most of the time they relied on sponge bathing, talcs, and perfumes. They ate much differently than we do today, and they wore a lot of cotton undergarments that absorbed sweat. Watertown also had several bathhouses in its downtown along the river, and those places did a very booming business because we had a lot of families where the gentleman would want a bath. We had a college for the Lutheran preparatory system and a college for the Catholic, for the priests going into the ministry. So there were a lot of men that were in need of baths as well as women. So those facilities were very popular until the later 1800s when our waterworks went in and people started having bathrooms in their homes. Oh. Oh.
Whose call is that?
Just wait here a second. You might want to do that while it's not so crowded.
Okay.
Those are Indian artifacts, and that's not going to be up there much longer because it's not. Years ago when it was put up there, it was one thing, but it's not real tasteful anymore. Those are just all things found in the area.
Long snooze here.
Yeah. Good work. It was hard to find you. You want to run up there? It's not as crowded.
Oh, this is the what?
Cupola. Basically, this home was just an area where they could dry things, lots of natural sunlight, beautiful view.
Well, you made it to the top. You're only 7.5 years old and you already made it to the top of mine. What an honor. Pretty neat, huh? Look at all the little arrowheads. Lots of Indian.
Steep. Almost like a ladder.
Who was it?
Christian Frederick Werner, the guy who made those hair pictures.
How is he?
He's my, oh god, I'm not sure. He's like the mother, he's the father of my grandfather's mother.
So we have to hear
Last call for the cupola.
Watch your head.
Wasn't very cool. This stove would have been puffing away from probably 4 in the morning on through anywhere 8 or 9 in the evening. But lots of food had to be prepared for the workmen and for the family. Off to that side, there's a small wedge-shaped room that is what they call their light pantry because it has a window. Most of the things in there were just cooking utensils and dishes and some food items. The room on the other side of the kitchen has the same floor space, but it has no window, and they called it their dark pantry. And then that room is where they kept most of their canned goods so that the sunlight couldn't deteriorate the food. Throughout this room, there are items that to them were very familiar in everyday cooking. This, for instance, is a coffee bean roaster. It could be put right over the burner, and it opens at the halfway point. And it would be pivoted back and forth so that the coffee beans could be roasted prior to being ground for coffee. Up on top, we've got a number of irons, including this. This is a crimping iron for making the ruffles, the cuffs, and so forth on their fancy wear. This is a Dutch oven. Fire would be built in there of hardwood. It would burn down to ashes, and they would sweep out the ashes. The heat had absorbed into the bricks, and then they put their loaves of bread in there to bake and close the door. It was a very gradual process that gave them a very delicious bread. Their loaves were round and flat rather than being pan square like we're used to today. As we pass through into the next room, you'll see the side of the furnace and the Dutch oven. And then to your left, so this wall is the wall of the cistern.
I tell you, I'm getting old. Some of this stuff is going to be used last week.
Squeeze in there, there's plenty of space. Floor has sand in it. Sometimes they even buried some of the food to keep it fresh, or carrots especially, turnips. From this wall back and all the way down to the kitchen was cistern. There was a lot of soft rainwater that they had ready. Approximately a third of the floor space of the basement was cistern. But they had a lot of uses for water, and so it was always ready. By each tap there was a box built into the wall that held charcoal and other things so that the water was filtered and came out purer than if it had just been left in from the... Happy weekend. Yep. Watch your step. The sill is kind of high. Sure.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
They used to plant all their like, what do you call it, herbs and stuff out here. Parsley, oregano.